I'm Elizabeth Ames, and this is Product Rising. Today's episode is part of our periodic series on the state of the job market. I'm joined today by Catherine Fisher, VP of Communications for LinkedIn and a career expert. Catherine was recently involved in the creation of LinkedIn's annual report on the job market for recent graduates. The report is based on job data from LinkedIn as well as sentiment research among employees in the first 3 years of their career across the U.S. With the challenges in today's job market, we felt this guide would be helpful to grads looking to start their careers as well as those in their first few years. Here is our conversation. Catherine, welcome to the podcast. It's fabulous to have you here today.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to talk about this guide that you guys have created for graduates this year. But before we launch into that, what I wanted to ask you a little bit about was research that LinkedIn might do overall, because I think that some of our listeners would be surprised to know that you guys do publish research in different forms at different times. So maybe you can kind of give people a sense of what you guys do and what's
Yes.
available.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about LinkedIn is because we can look at trends and all the data that we have in terms of jobs, like if we see where people are getting more jobs or skills being added to profiles, positions being opened, where people are moving within the country, et cetera. So we have access to all this data based on, anonymized data, but it allows us to kind of really track in terms of what we're seeing in the labor market. We have our Economic Graph Institute that, the Research Institute, they look at all of this data and it really helps us identify what are these trends that we're seeing with professionals and companies who are hiring. And then we package that up so that our, professionals on LinkedIn can take a look at it and really understand, like, okay, if you're looking for a job, what are some skills that I should be adding, knowing, what companies are looking for, et cetera. So it is a treasure trove of data for people in terms of really getting that insight of what's happening with the labor market.
Yeah. And I think that that is such a hot topic right now because of so many changes going on in the labor market. And it's kind of hard to pick apart what's actually impacting what.
Yes.
So having that kind of research and being able to see kind of the numbers behind the scene is extremely valuable. Um, now, you guys chose to research and write about job opportunities for graduates. So is this the first time you've done that? Is this a one in a long series? Talk a little bit about why you tackled that.
Yes. So it is not the first time we've looked at grads, and we publish it annually, LinkedIn's Grads Guide. And it really is designed to help people as they're graduating from college understand the job market. And, there's been some years when it has been super easy for college grads to get a job.
Yeah.
And now we're finding this year it is more challenging. So this is something that it's a service that we offer to our, the professionals on LinkedIn in terms of really where the industries that they should be looking at, the skills that companies are looking to hire, the locations. We can look to see what are the really hot spots. If you're a new grad, where should you consider moving if you want to have more of a chance to look, to secure a job. So we regularly, publish lists in terms like we have top companies, we have top startups, we have the jobs on the rise and skills on the rise. So this is a regular occurrence on LinkedIn in terms of sharing that data. And this one is specific to really more entry level workers.
Yeah. I think it's a great reminder to people that that kind of information is out there, and maybe as a way of kind of opening up their mind to alternatives that they hadn't thought about, right? Like
Yes.
some people may have never thought, well, maybe if I move to a bigger tech hub, or maybe if different locations would make a difference. And so it kind of helps pull that information out and get people to think about things differently. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about looking at the data on LinkedIn. I know that that's included in this report, but maybe you can kind of talk about the other things that are types of things that are in this report and how they're kind of melded together, if you will, or why you chose to do that.
Yes. So when we looked at, what was happening for new grads, I mean, I'm sure you've heard from people in your community. I have a daughter who's in college, so it's really obviously a timely discussion right now. What people are feeling right now is that it's a really competitive job market. So what we're seeing is that hiring is down 5% or actually 6% year over year. And so you may say, well, 6% doesn't feel terrible. But when you compare that to, you know, post COVID, it's down 20%. So that's why it feels really stressful right now. You have that happening, you have people staying in their jobs longer, and you have companies trying to figure out AI and like, what does this mean for their workforce? And how do we implement that into, the work streams, et cetera. So there's just this compounding effect in terms of competitive. People are staying in their jobs longer. The entry points to getting into that role are changing. But one of the, kind of the bright lights of the research that we found is that yes, we know that AI engineer is one of the top jobs, but there are also some of those traditional jobs that companies are still hiring for that really help them make them profitable. So think of like a marketing coordinator or a recruitment assistant. So some of those more traditional jobs are still in demand, plus AI engineer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting market from that standpoint. And um y- yeah. So talk a little bit about the other pieces. The thing that stood out to me also was the inclusion of um stories from people who were seeking jobs, who had found unique ways to develop their career and to get the experience that they were looking for and opportunities along the way. I mean, I think having those people talk gives people a sense of, oh, it may not be exactly the way it was, but there are different ways of thinking about this. So,
Yeah. So what we're finding is that, that kind of your entry point may look a little bit different. First of all, it may not be the job title you were thinking that you were going to get. So I think taking away some of those expectations that you had in terms of getting that perfect job. Perfect job is not out there. Even 20 years into your career, the perfect job is not going to be out there. And what's happening is that with the younger generation entering the job market, they're facing the competition and they're being more creative in terms of how they get those skills needed. And so you see some people who are saying, okay, I can maybe have two part-time jobs. I can start, a company on the side in terms of maybe I could help with, social media, et cetera. And they're building their skill sets in different ways. And we're seeing this kind of fluidity in terms of their career happening. And I've talked to a lot of graduates and they're at this point where they just want to get the experience. And it may not be in that, you know, it used to be that you would graduate and you would just kind of get an internship and then you would get the job and then you would go up and up and up. Now, because people are looking at their careers much more creatively in terms of it's less of that up and to the right, and it's more of like kind of what we talk about is like the climbing wall. So as you're building your career, you're thinking through what are the relationships I want to build? What are the skills that I want to build? What's the experience I want to gain? And it may not be in what you thought was that traditional first job. So I think a lot of creativity in terms of how people are getting that experience. One thing that I hear a lot from people is that when they're applying for a role that requires a certain level, they say, well, they're looking for 3 to 5 years experience, and I don't have that, or I don't have a network. That the comeback to that is you probably do have a lot of the skills. It's just not. It may not have been acquired in a traditional corporate setting. So if you were, let's say, working through college, every year you had a job through college, that's 4 years of experience as long as you're really mapping to the skills that are being required in those jobs. And then the other thing I hear is that people feel like they don't have a network. In fact, this is one of the biggest barriers that we hear from the Gen Z generation is that they don't feel that they have the network to lean into for their, to get a job. And we know that that network really does matter. And they actually do have a network. It's similar to thinking like, well, if I don't have, 4 years experience at a corporate job, I don't have any experience. You do. Same thing with your network. Think about the, professors that you've built relationships with. Maybe you babysat for a family. Maybe you had a, college jobs. That is collecting those relationships. So I think that sometimes people will think that they're coming from a place of weakness, but they actually have more strength to them than they realize.
Yeah, listening to you talk, it makes me realize a couple of things. One is that uh, I don't think that jobs have ever really always been like this straight line, right?
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, it's valuable to get rid of that idea right from the get go and understand that you're going to make pivots, you're going to see opportunities that are, not exactly directly in front of you, but over here. And you have to figure out, how do I get over there?
Yeah.
How do I build the skills to do that? How do I meet new people that can facilitate it? How do I talk about the skills that I have, right? Um, because we work a lot with product managers and stuff, storytelling is a big part of being a product
Yes.
manager. And storytelling is also a big part about like finding a job. How do you talk about the experiences that you've had? How do you help share examples of skills that you've developed and how you mastered them or those types of things? So, and if it's at all reassuring to people in some ways, getting that feeling early on is important. And also, I think that we think that people get a degree and that's what they do for the rest of their lives. And it
Right.
doesn't, like, people have crazy degree job matches, right? Like, I worked in tech my whole career, and my undergraduate degree's in fine arts. But
Mind
I
art
could
history.
Right, but I could tell
Yes.
you a lot of things that I learned in that degree, um, that served me well once I got into, jobs, right? The ability to talk about the work that you've done, explain how you came to that conclusion in a nebulous situation, And those are the things that are important to learn, and I think your report really supports that. Like, think about these things, right?
It does. And you hit on something so important, which is the art of storytelling. It is critical in your job, actually, really in your career. You're going to be storytelling your entire career, whether it is to get the job, whether it's to get the promotion or to sell something. You have to get really comfortable with telling your story. And I think that, where you want to start is understanding what that story needs to be. And that's why looking at things like LinkedIn's Grad Guide is so important because then it allows you to understand, okay, in this, if you're looking for a role right now, understanding like what's happening in the industry, what's happening with companies, what are they really looking for? If you know that, those AI skills, leadership and communication are some of the really important skills to have, think about what is your story behind that. And you mentioned, you get skills in college. Maybe you worked on a group project and you were the leader of that group project. That's leadership. So
Yeah.
that's how you have to really start. Don't put these barriers in front of yourself that you don't have because you have been gaining this experience. It's just it doesn't feel as like traditional experiences as one may think is that people are expecting. They just want to know that you can get into the role and be successful with the skills needed and how you acquire those skills is fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, and, the thing that I think about when you talk about that is just if you're graduating from a degree program, like, you can talk about your ability to learn new things, which is gonna
Yeah.
become super important, right? Like, they're not just hiring you for the skills you have today, they're hiring you especially because they think you're gonna grow, because you can learn, because you can adapt, etcetera.
Yes. Adaptability we see as one of the top skills that hiring managers want. And I think it's especially important right now with AI coming into the workforce in terms of, okay, how quickly are you going to be able to adapt to the new technology, and also help as companies are figuring out how does this work in terms of the workflows. How do we get people, to understand the technology, to grow with it, to learn, and help others figure it out. And I think that for the younger generation entering the job market, this is a real advantage because you can step in and say, like, this is how I've been using AI. This is how, some of the steps that I've taken, and we're all learning it at the same time. So you're in the position in terms of, you can be that person that people go to or help to understand how it works, et cetera. So I think that it's actually, I see it as an equalizer right now. Is a lot of people are stepping into these roles, understanding what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, let's kind of drill down into the report itself. You touched on some of the data that was here. Um, do you want to kind of give people a bit of a view into the report and what you see as sort of the biggest things for them to think about that this report would prompt them to think about?
Yes. If you are, entering the job market, you want to be really strategic about your job search. You want to take a look and assess what the industries that are hiring. And so right now we know that technology, media and information, real estate, and financial services are what we saw as the three top industries that are looking for entry level work. So start there. Then you want to look at what are those top three jobs that companies are looking for: AI engineer, marketing coordinator, recruitment assistant. And there are more in the report that, so obviously go look at the report because you can get more detail.
Yeah.
And then take those. So you have the industries, you have the jobs that companies are looking for, and then you have the location. And as not everyone is able to pick up and move, but in
Sure.
this competitive job market, you want to, like, what I mean by being strategic and just making sure that you're standing out. If it's possible, look for roles in the areas that we know are hiring. Probably not a surprise, San Francisco, Seattle are hiring. Those are very expensive places. So if you're new to the job market, that may be a tough place to start. If you want to go to Orlando or Salt Lake City or Atlanta, those regions are hiring as well. So I think just having that open mind in terms of what that first job looks like is going to be really important because it is so competitive. So it's kind of untethering yourself from what you thought that first job would be and approaching it in terms of, I'm going to get the experience, I'm going to get the skills, and most importantly, I'm going to build the network. And so if you're approaching it that way, again, it might not be the job that you thought you wanted right out of college, but it could be a job that is going to be a stepping stone for your career.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about, um, you know, the alternatives in terms of uh, unusual paths that people may take to jobs, building skills in different ways. It's sort of like making use of your time while you're looking for a job and building that skill set to make you a better candidate for a particular job that you're interested in. Do you have any?
Yeah.
Are there things in the report that you think are valuable for people like that?
Yeah, I think it is looking at to see, okay, where, if I don't have some of these skills that companies are looking for, where can I go learn them? And you can learn them, obviously you learned a lot during college. You can continue learning online. You can also tap into your network in terms of understanding like really what companies are looking for. I spoke with a couple of folks who they had just started their job, and they were creators. So they had full-time jobs, but they were really interested in kind of more of the creator economy. So what they did, one woman in particular talked to her manager and like carved out time to become a creator for the company. And while this is an example of someone who's already in the workforce, I think it's creative in terms of how she looked at her career, in terms of like the value that she was going to bring to the job, but also doing something that she was really interested in that benefited the company. So that kind of, I think, looking at your role in that different, like it's not just kind of stepping into something that is, what we would say is kind of cookie cutter. It's having that creativity in terms of how you get the skills that you want. We do see like, more interest in entrepreneurship. And, we talk to people who may have three different jobs as they are looking for a full-time job, or maybe that's just how they want to approach their career in general. So I think that you're seeing, because of the competitiveness, you do see that some people are choosing to take, maybe starting something on their own on the side, having a part-time job. It's that kind of that traditional entry point is looking a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that way. And I would say to people to also think about if there's a particular area that you're interested in working in, like, can you get opportunities to do that kind of things and so that you can have examples of it?
Yes.
Even if it's not for pay per se, but it might be, working for a nonprofit
Yeah.
on interim basis or something,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
And maybe you ran social media for your sorority. Like that's social media experience, right?
yeah,
I think one of the best examples is if you were like a waitress, a waiter, a bartender, that the skills that you get in that role, that is leadership, it's communication, it's conflict resolution, it's sales. So really thinking about that experience differently. It's not that don't think about it as the job, about as the skills. And to what we were saying earlier, is that then getting that really understanding how to tell those stories. So, maybe you were a bartender and you had the highest sales. Well, how did you do that? You did that because you built relationships with people. You understood kind of the dynamics of the business, et cetera. So really like taking that extra step to tell that story.
yeah. So, one of the things I think, and you've talked about this a little bit, is building your network or
Mhm.
recognizing that you actually have a network today, may not
Yeah.
be the exact network that you would like. Um, you have some great examples of people in here who kind of dive in to start to build their network in different ways. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are often intimidated by that. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know what to say. I feel awkward. Um, I'm an introvert. I don't even like being
Yeah.
in those rooms.
Yeah. Yes.
So I don't know if you guys have any specific recommendations for people in the report, but maybe you could talk about that a little bit because I find that people kind of in some ways overthink it, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Agreed. Yeah.
yeah,
So your network is going to carry you throughout your career.
yeah,
Start building it now. You already have a network, like you said. You may not realize it, but you've actually been collecting, contacts and building that network from the first time you started working.
yeah,
So you have that base. As you go to build your network, focus on, okay, what are the industries that I'm interested in? Start there, but start by asking for introductions to someone. And so this is where people also get caught up. Like, well, how do I ask someone to ask for an introduction? And my advice is just be super clear what you're asking for and clear, specific, and then time bound it. So if you're reaching out to someone and you say, could you make an introduction to me to this person? Here's why. I'm interested in this job. I'm interested in this industry. And I have these three questions I want to ask them. Make it easy for them to make that introduction. And then when they make the introduction, ask for 15 minutes. Really, so much can be accomplished in 15 minutes. And it's much easier for someone to say yes to a 15-minute coffee chat, virtual, than it is to a 30-minute, let me go pick your brain. But if you're really clear in terms of what you're wanting to get out of that conversation, the better. I want to understand, like, how did you get started in your career? What three skills do you look for in a candidate, et cetera? So being really clear there. That's kind of that's higher stakes networking. There's also simple things you can do though to build a network. And this is obviously why I booked LinkedIn, is that it does make it easy to kind of slowly and gradually build rapport with people, whether it is commenting on posts, liking something, sharing something. you will see that conversations really happen in the comments. And that is kind of where the magic happens. So
Yeah.
I always tell people is there is kind of the easy commenting on a post, liking something, sharing an article you read with your perspective, make sure that it's interesting. And then there's kind of the okay, 15-minute coffee, or maybe I do take someone out to lunch. Networking does not mean you have to go buy someone a meal all the time, but I would say, have a goal for yourself in terms of I want to do light touch networking X times a week. And then when higher touch, maybe every 4 to 6 weeks. If you set that goal, it'll help you stay on track. And then it becomes more natural. And then you don't need these, kind of constructs because it just kind of becomes a natural part of your day or your weeks or months. But that network is crucial. And we know that 38% of hiring managers, take a special look at someone who has been referred. So it really is important.
Yeah. I think your advice is so good. And LinkedIn is a great place to do these kinds of things. There's a couple of things that I always want to say to people, and that is, in general, 8 or 9 people out of 10 want to help you. They want to
Yes.
help young people.
Yeah.
Their constraints are really just going to be time and whether you're a good fit for their advice, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't go ask the CEO of a company. That's not a great use of his time. But if you
Right.
ask somebody who's a little further in their career than you, they will help you because they've been
Yes.
there, right?
Yeah.
And go with questions, don't, or with asks. Like, people would set up time with me and would have a chat, but they wouldn't ask me to do anything. And if they
Yeah.
asked me, I would be inclined to do it. They were specific, if it's a
Yes.
specific thing, right? Not a general thing like, can you introduce me to people? Can you introduce me to this person because
Exactly.
XYZ, right?
Yes.
So, um, and I love your thing about regularly set aside some time because you do want to spend time on it. And I know people think, well, I don't know that person that well, but there's a lot of research that says that those loose connections can be the most valuable connections. And again,
Yes.
people generally want to help you.
Yeah.
So,
Just because someone helped you along the way, right?
yes.
That the person who is, if you're asking someone, I guarantee you they were in the position you're in and want to help. And because you mentioned that time is, that's usually the barrier. That's why I always say just ask for 15 minutes. It may go longer than 15 minutes, but it's really easy to say yes to 15 minutes. And to your point, being as specific as possible, you'll get the most out of it. And then it's easier to say yes to someone who's asking for time if I can answer, like I am the right person to answer these questions, right? So a lot of times if it's open ended, you're like, I don't know if I'm actually the right person for you. So you don't want to make the other person have to do the work.
Right, right. Now, one of the people that's in the report that you kind of follow what they have done
Yeah.
really did a lot of networking by going to industry events locally and
Hmm.
just meeting people there. It's a little bit of a daunting thing, I think, for a lot of people because it feels a little like, ooh, I don't know what I'm doing. But
Yeah.
I always try and encourage people to do those. Like, okay, maybe the first time you go, you're kind of observing and checking things out. Set a goal for yourself. Try and introduce yourself to 2 people, right?
Yeah.
Um, but LinkedIn is such a great resource here because then you can go back and connect with those people,
Yeah.
right? And say, it was so nice to meet you today. I really appreciate it. If you have any recommendations about X, send them my way. I'd love to hear from you, right?
Yes. Exactly. That is
Ye-
exactly how to do it.
Yeah. And people, those become really valuable, and you will definitely meet people and make connections that are ultimately valuable to you. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
So,
I've hired one person who I met in a different, work. It wasn't an industry event, but it was outside of work. Met her. We started, she reached out to me on LinkedIn. We emailed back and forth, and I helped get her an interview, and now she has a job. Someone else had reached out to me cold and had some questions about LinkedIn. I thought the conversation was really smart, connected her to the hiring manager. She was hired. So it can lead to a job. And I think your point in terms of having like, okay, I'm going to go talk to two people and then I'm going to connect with them afterwards. You can do that. Like it's when you walk in and think you have to go meet 40 people and, have deep conversations with everyone. That's not the expectation. The expectation is that you are meeting people and that you connect. And if you really do feel like you have something that you know and trust this person, then yes, go connect with them and build that relationship. And I think that the other piece of advice I always give is bring a friend with you. Like if or a former colleague or a coworker, it just makes it easier. And you can say, okay, we're going to go circle the room for 20 minutes and then come back, talk about what we learned, and then go back out. It makes it a little bit more fun and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm trying to think here. So, there's a couple of things out in the marketplace today. These aren't necessarily included in your report, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And you can
Okay.
decline to answer. But I think that there are kind of a couple of schools of thought out there on applying for jobs, right? Like some people
Mhm.
say, just send a million applications and you don't have to be completely qualified, see what hits. And other people are take a much more specific approach. They apply to jobs, only jobs that they fully believe that they are qualified for, that they're interested in, or they know somebody in the company. Do you have, or the other thing that you get is some people do it just through networking.
Mm.
Like they're going to network people that are in a particular company that they're interested in and, look for something there. Or they've picked out do
Yeah.
you have a sense of what works? Is there any data that you can bring to bear on that?
I do have a sense of what works. And I think it
Uh,
is being strategic in your job search. And that is a combination of leaning into your network and being really specific about where you apply. What's happening is people are mass applying and they're applying for roles that they're not qualified for. They don't have the skills and experience. So they're not going to hear back. And then what we're hearing from recruiters is that they are getting inundated by applications and they simply don't have time to reply to everyone who has applied. And so it kind of creates this vicious cycle of people, mass applying. And then it's really frustrating because then they don't hear back. So that makes them want to go apply more and more. But if you approach it in terms of am I going to have the most, the highest chance of hearing back, that's where you want to lean into. And that's where you also lean into your network. So, okay, here are these three jobs that I took a look. We have something on LinkedIn called Jobs Match, and it'll actually, if you look at the job description, it'll compare your profile with that job description and tell you how likely you are, like how good of a match you are for the job. So it'll show you the skills that you may have that are great, but the skills that are missing. And this does a couple of things. One, it either says you need to go, if you really want this job, you need to go acquire these skills.
yeah.
Or it could flag, wait a minute, I have these skills. Why is it I just don't have them on my
I
profile?
don't have them
So
in my resume here.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is what I mean about being strategic. So take that step, apply intentionally, and lean on your network. I think that it's the combination of those two that is gonna really help. But the mass applying doesn't. It's just frustrating. It's a time suck, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah. You touched on the feedback loop and the frustration that people have with the feedback loop. Not only just like that they didn't even get a response from the company, but even if they come in for interviews, but then they don't make it to the next round, they don't really get any feedback. And I know this isn't necessarily what LinkedIn does, but do you have any um, recommendations or things that you would point people to that would help them get feedback that would be helpful in some way, right? Like
Yeah.
you just use that one LinkedIn tool as a way of getting feedback on your resume in a way. Like, hey, I have
Yeah.
that skill. Oh, how do I?
Yeah.
But do you have any other things along those lines?
Yeah, I think it is really important if you let's say you go through the interview process and you don't move forward. I think a lot of people just kind of feel like, oh gosh, I was just rejected. I kind of want to move on. Take that as an opportunity to learn. And most times I find that if you reach out to the hiring manager or the recruiter saying, thank you so much for your time, it would be really helpful for me in my job search to understand kind of where what I should have done, not differently, but like why did I not progress so that you can apply those learnings to the next job. Most of the time, people, like we were saying before, people want to help people, will provide that valuable feedback. A really good question I like in interviews is there anything about my experience that lends you pause that you think that maybe I don't have the right, that maybe I'm not the right fit for this role? And that I think is really, it's a little vulnerable because you're asking for feedback right there on the spot. But what that
Yeah.
does is that then you kind of know, hey, it gives the hiring manager the opportunity to say, I think you've got these great skills. This is the one where I'm not sure you have the right set of experience. And we can either agree, yes, that's true, or maybe you have to be a better storyteller and you do have that experience. So I think there's kind of this openness and, asking for the feedback along the way is
Yeah.
really helpful. And it's actually something that you're going to take, once you land the job, is that feedback loop is part of your career as well. So it's not just in the interview, it's asking for feedback, within your career.
Yeah. So I'm gonna like give a little pitch here. Uh, Women in Product, who produces this podcast, we have a very large community, about 35,000 women in our community, and there are a number of community platforms that we're a part of, social media platforms and private community platforms, and they're great places for people who are starting out to talk to people who are just a little bit ahead of them and to get that kind of support and feedback where people will review your resume, your LinkedIn profile. They'll do mock interviews with you if you ask and you have a particular job you're applying for. And, you don't have to be, there are all kinds of organizations or communities like that are out there that you can join. So I would encourage people to look for those as well. They're places where you can get support and get feedback.
Yeah.
So we'll put some of those in the show notes as well. There are some floating around that are helpful that.
And I think it is such good advice to practice before going into an interview. There's some standard questions, you're going to expect, like, why are you interested in this job? Tell me a time that had conflict or something like that. So really practicing your story and how you wanted to get it across because those first impressions really matter. So take the time to practice.
Yes. And I would say oftentimes people think that just writing something and reading it back to themselves in their head is good practice. It's not. It's like public speaking. You have to actually say it out loud over and
Yes.
over and over and over. And it sounds like you're programming yourself, but what you are doing is you're programming yourself to be comfortable in that moment, right?
Yes.
And uh, as with public speaking, I think when you go on a job interview, you've got a lot of adrenaline going. And sometimes people think, well, I'm so nervous. How do I get not nervous? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, do some box breathing, do some, slow breathing. You don't want to completely tamp down the energy, but you want to be
Yeah.
able to control and direct it. And practice
Yes.
helps you get that control and
Exactly.
that mastery. So, like, take every opportunity that comes your way to do those kind of mock interviews or conversations with people. Again, you'll learn. A lot of times you can
Yeah.
tell in their face. Going,
Absolutely. And if you know that you're walking into a situation where you will be nervous, like then taking extra time so that you're not, because you want them to, and when you're in that conversation, you want them to focus on, is this person going to be successful in this role? And if you walk in with a bundle of nerves, they may think they have the skills, but wow, they didn't have the confidence that I need them to have to be successful here. To do everything you can to feel confident, and that this is where your network really is going to work overtime for you.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so are there any big points that we haven't talked about that you can think of here or words of wisdom that you have for new grads?
Yes, I would say, you know, don't don't think that you don't have the experience and skills that you need to get your foot in the door. You probably do. You're just going to have to look back creatively in terms of what you've been doing, up until this time in terms of getting different experience, whether that's through class projects, summer jobs, etc. And then the next thing is, start to build that network. That network is going to be incredibly important. You can start small. It will start to grow. You don't have to connect with everyone on LinkedIn. You can follow them. That could lead to conversations and become a connection. Super important. And then focus on getting your profile in a good spot. Because we know obviously the we talked about earlier in terms of like making sure that you have the skills on there so that that gets when you look at those roles, that it's connecting you to the right jobs. But it's also, this is where hiring managers and recruiters are going to take a look at you. So upload, class projects as examples of work. Be really clear in that about section in terms of what you're looking for and the impact that you've had in other experiences. So maybe maybe you were like you worked at the summer camp. Were you the lead camp counselor? Did you help, trust me, my daughter works, she's a camp counselor. There's a lot of conflict resolution with those little kids, right? So, really kind of being creative in terms of how you are approaching your skills and use really filling out that experience section. It's people don't expect you to have, if you're coming out of college, they don't think you worked at, a big consulting firm for 5 years. They do. You want to see, did you intern? Did you do any volunteer work, et cetera? So you can add that volunteer work, for example, onto your profile. So just make sure that that's up to date and have a profile photo.
Yeah. One last thought that kind of goes through my mind is that the tech industry is very familiar with LinkedIn as a platform that is used by professionals across the industry, right? The tech industry. But I suspect from your standpoint, it's much broader than the tech industry. You serve many industries,
Mhm.
but there may be college grads who aren't familiar with it as much and are just getting started thinking about it. So I don't know if you want to give a little pitch to them to get a little bit more involved. I mean, you mentioned earlier like following different people.
Yeah.
I do think that that is a great thing to do. Sometimes you'll just learn. Like there's some people that post a lot of stuff and have a lot of insight, and yeah, you should follow them and you'll learn a lot. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to say anything about that.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, you have access to people who have doing maybe what you want to be doing in the next few years. You can learn from them on LinkedIn. Think of LinkedIn almost like going to the gym. So, if you join a new gym, you sign up, you get the free week trial, and you go those 5 days and you're so excited, and then you never go back. You're not going to see a difference, right? You're not going to feel healthier, etc. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. It's just like going to the gym. So think about, okay, maybe I am not going to do a post the first day, but I'm going to go intentionally follow 3 people so that I start getting that content. I'm going to contribute a comment on someone's post as long as it's insightful. What you don't want to do is just say, great post. What you want to do is like, what did you find interesting about it? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? What's your opinion on this? So that is, step 2. Start following people, connecting with people that you know, building out that profile. And just like I said, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And it is this living, breathing network for you that's there to help you.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I mean, that was, I think, a great conversation. I really hope it's valuable to our listeners. I think a lot of them are, diving into the working world, and hopefully
Yeah.
LinkedIn will be a big part of that. So I
Great.
really
Well, thanks for
appreciate
having me.
I really appreciate that great report. I think it's a great resource, and people should take a look at it. So we'll include the links in the show notes so everyone can find the things that we've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is an original production of Women in Profit. Follow us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Leave us a review so that others can discover us. Or share this episode with someone you know. Original music provided by Jimmy Hahn.